everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick update on my experience with the Sony CyberShot DSC RX10 Mark II. Priced at $1,300 US, you're looking at, in my opinion, the best point-and-shoot bridge-style camera ever made. But that's not what today's update is about, or getting into a full review. I've covered much of that in my most recent update. Today is all about video, and for those of you wondering, does this camera, like the A7R Mark II that I published a video on yesterday regarding overheating when capturing UHD video, does this suffer from that same ailment? The answer is no. So if you're in the market still for a bridge style camera that truly offers you the best of both worlds, both still and video, you really are looking at it right here. And I can tell you, in the time I've spent with it, it's very easy to see why something like this could replace your gear bag. And that's because not only does it start off with the most important element, that 1-inch backlit sensor with its stacked design, which allows for better low light still as well as video capability than arguably the AX100 I'm filming on right now at UHD 30p 100 megabits per second, the same actual literal capability when it comes to specifications as the video camera that's capturing this right now, with a 1-inch sensor that again is improved with its backlit design. But in addition to that, you also have a much better still camera than obviously what I'm filming on right now. So from a video perspective, also the aperture ring here being clickable and also silent, depending on whether you want to have that tactile step feel for shooting stills and knowing where you're at without looking, or if you're in the video world, which this thing lives just as happily in, and you want to make sure that it is completely silent, you can easily control that right here with that switch. And I've mentioned this before in my update, but it's all about that 1-inch sensor, the glass pairing. It's really what has made the Sony RX lineup famous for being best in class. This is a weather-sealed body. Another great thing, beyond the fact that it does not overheat, which I cannot reiterate enough, I've stress tested this thing to the end essentially on that. So not even necessary to bring the LCD away from body, like I mentioned with the A7R Mark II. It will just keep on going. Remember that your video clips will be limited to 29:59, so roughly 30 minutes. But again, it's all about how many SD cards do you have and how many batteries. And that's the next point I'm coming to, which is that the battery life on here is fantastic with regard to UHD video capture. Another thing that I wish the A7R Mark II excelled at, even though, of course, we can't really compare the 1-inch sensor in here, backlit sensor, to the full-frame 42 megapixel backlit sensor in the A7R Mark II. Apples to oranges, but something I know many of you are going to consider, and quite frankly, for some of you, overheating is a game breaker. And that's what I think makes this an incredible B cam for video, but that isn't to say that it's not also a great A cam for many consumers. I think that this is one of the few cameras Sony makes, even though it commands a high price, that really can accommodate just about any photographer, from the average consumer, the hobbyist, all the way up to someone photojournalist, professional, prosumer, whoever it is. This camera will make anybody in that range satisfied, in my opinion. Now, it isn't a perfect solution, but what I've mentioned, the fact that there's no overheating in UHD video, you've got a great range on this lens, granted not a mega zoom like the Panasonic FZ1000, but it excels where the FZ1000 failed, which was essentially just the still side of things. While it had great 5-axis image stabilization for 4K video capture, the stills are nowhere near the quality of this camera. And I have reviewed the FZ1000 for those of you unfamiliar with my channel, so that's something I want to let you know in advance. So the FZ1000 does have a reach and stabilization benefit over this camera, but when it comes to real-world performance, use, and output, this thing kills the FZ1000 in just about every regard. Build quality also superior, just like the first gen of RX camera. The weather sealing isn't weatherproofing, but definitely better to have than not. And the built-in neutral density filter is another thing that reminds me of my AX100 that I'm filming on now, that again, on paper achieves the same quality video, but in real life, I think it's easy to argue that this camera, even though it's not a bona fide true video camera, does shoot higher quality, more dynamic video, and because of its S-Log feature, even has more flexibility, of course, than the AX100, which is a more expensive camera, but simply has that feature omitted, something that Sony has now brought into or on board all of their latest gen cameras, the RX100 Mark IV included, as well as the A7R Mark II. So no overheating here, a fantastic lens sensor pairing, incredible flexibility when it comes to controls. Sony really making a bridge camera that I think is going to attract people that traditionally would scoff at a bridge camera. And those of you that are after the best bridge camera on the market, well, you have found it. So even though today's video isn't a full review, I did want to reiterate, video overheating is not an issue. I simply have not hit a wall with this. And battery life, again, so much better than the A7R Mark II when it comes to video capture. And they both do use the FW50, which is surprising, but it speaks to just the efficiency of the camera itself. And when I say it's far superior, you're talking about that one of these batteries inside the camera that I'm reviewing here, the RX10 Mark II, can yield about, I would say, roughly a little over an hour of video. In the A7R Mark II, you're looking at more like, a half hour. So a very big difference in battery life when it comes to video capture. So for videographers, that's going to make a difference. And then the fact that we have a power zoom on here, even though it's limited to 24 to 200 millimeters, is another element that's going to appeal to videographers, especially since great UHD footage, even though this is not going to give you the Super 35 performance that you'll get with the A7R Mark II, it's still going to deliver something you simply cannot get from any other manufacturer right now in a single body. So this can replace a gear bag, no question about it. Quick to power on. You do have different levels of zoom speed, which I think is critical for users that were disappointed with the single zoom speed on the original generation. The fact that the build quality has been maintained, design still kept together, I think are all great benefits. So really, this camera has done nothing but improve. Again, it reminds me of what I wish was around in the first gen of the RX10, but the fact that Sony's delivered on it tells me two things. One, they listened to consumers, addressed issues, and two, we probably didn't get a mega zoom because even though Panasonic pushed for it, that 1-inch sensor probably isn't ideal for long or mega zoom like glass. And the FZ1000 sort of proves that once you get past 200, things do get pretty ugly. It doesn't mean it's not serviceable. It doesn't mean that it's still not a great camera. I mean, it's roughly half the price of this right now. So I'm going to easily recommend that to many of you if the mega zoom element is critical and that 5-axis stabilization. But for those of you that were worried about 4K video overheating with the RX10 Mark II, you can put those, or I was going to say fears, aside or to rest, because it simply will not happen. Now, as for the high-speed slow-mo capability, I personally don't care about that, but definitely better to have that capability than not at all, even though I see it as a gimmick. It's something that even the much more expensive full-frame A7R Mark II does not have integrated. Maybe that speaks to the fact that Sony thinks it's not really a prosumer feature, but either way, this I can easily see being a great A-cam for just about every walk of life, and then for pros and photojournalists, a great B-cam. Having something like this with the A7R Mark II really would be just about a complete system if you have a few primes for the A7R Mark II and then lean on this as your video machine, rather than taking out something like the AX100 or an AX33 with inferior video quality because of the smaller sensor that doesn't have the same direct pixel readout. I'm not going to get into pixel binning, but that pretty much sums up today's update. It was really all about overheating and just, again, how incredibly impressed I am with this camera. In fact, at one point, I really didn't think that it was going to be something that I would personally consider to throw into my gear bag simply because of the overlap of great 4K editions that Sony's brought out with their last 4 cameras that have launched over the course of this summer. But I have to say, the fact that this is the only one that doesn't overheat, and granted stabilization isn't incredible, we only have one mode of stabilization in 4K. Wish there was more. Also, you can't capture stills while shooting 4K video, which will disappoint many. Those are, again, the things that limit this from being a perfect camera. But otherwise, again, unmatched, much like the A7R Mark II, and that is what, in my opinion, makes it, I'm not going to say magical, but one of the best not only bridge cameras, but cameras ever made, because it can appeal, as I've mentioned over and over again, to just about every person interested in photography at any level, and give beginners something to really grow with over time. So a lot to like here, but again, no overheating, great battery life, and something that I think is really practical for everyone in the market for a fantastic DI tool, whether we're talking still, video, or the best of both worlds. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.